Hello and welcome to War Thunder Ground Forces. Annoyingly, I am recording this audio for a second time since reasons. Um, but anyways, yeah, Ground Forces, cool. It's in closed beta, and I happen to be in it. I got in this weekend thanks to a very kind gentleman on the internet who decided to take sympathy on me and actually gave me a invite code for this. Turns out I didn't really need it because I did get actually invited for my participation in the Ground Forces events 2 days later, but nevertheless I got in and I played, and it was really, really fun and very, very interesting. So let me just mention this battle first. I'm going to go up here, and this is a simulator battle in the Panzer III-L. I'm going to go up here, and I'm going to sit here for 2 minutes trying to shoot things in the middle. And it's not as much that I suck at aiming, because I was actually doing a pretty good job of aiming here, accounting for the distance, which I will get to all that later. But I was shooting at the side of a KV-1, and if you know anything about tanks, the Panzer III has no place in penetrating the side of a KV-1. At least with armor-piercing ammunition. So yeah, ignore the fact that I take a lot of shots and just sit here for a while. And I will move on eventually. So, War Thunder. Let me just first point out that this is not World Tanks, and I don't want to rival it versus World Tanks. I don't view this as a competitor of World Tanks, and I will happily play both games because they satisfy very, very different needs. Let me explain. As you see, first of all, War Thunder is beautiful. I would just like to point that out immediately. This game is amazing looking. It probably doesn't look as amazing because you're seeing through the recording software, but it still should be outputting in 1080p, so it should still look pretty darn nice. I was playing on high graphics, as you see in the top left, at around 25-ish frames per second, depending on the terrain. So it is a very, very nice looking game, and very well optimized at that. My computer, to give a benchmark to a game that's not very well optimized, which is World Tanks, which they are hopefully working on, I get around 25 frames per second on somewhere between high and it's like somewhere between high and medium in terms of my settings on World Tanks. I get 25 frames per second, and this looks very, very good on high graphics War Thunder, and I'm getting 25 frames per second and a more consistent frames per second at that. But regardless, let's talk about the gameplay. So, War Thunder. First thing off the bat is, where is my hit points if you're coming from World Tanks? War Thunder is based off of the same thing as the planes. It is based off of a critical hit system. You kill an enemy by making it just incapable of by putting it in a shape where it is incapable of fighting in combat. You need to disable as many systems and just modules and crew members of the vehicle that the game deems it is insufficient for combat. So, in this game, it is entirely possible that you will fire a shot, and it will go straight through a tank, and it will do absolutely nothing, because there's no engine there, there's no transmission there, there's not even a crew member there, nor is there a turret ring or anything else. It can be a completely insignificant hit. Or you could have a shot that goes through the side of your turret, blows up your ammo, or kills your commander, kills your gunner, kills your loader, damages your turret ring and your gun breech, and then it proceeds to explode your ammo. So it is all about shot placement in War Thunder and knowing how to protect your own spots. So I think I'm going to highly enjoy this game, learning where all these spots are and where these spots are and how it is best to destroy certain modules and how we can tactically abuse that. So that will be very interesting development of gameplay. As you see here, this is the view you would have in simulator mode approximately. You view from the viewpoint of the commander as if he was poking out of the hatch with it open. So that's very cool, and you can also go into the gun sight mode, of course. But second thing about War Thunder, although maybe a little bit, it is fair to say that there is no dispersion in War Thunder. This is not World of Tanks. You don't get your big circle, which shows where your shells will fly if you press the mouse. You instead get a small circle. And yes, the shells might be just a tiny bit off, but for all intents and purposes, it goes exactly where it says it's aimed. The thing is, though, you have to account for distance. No matter what game mode you're playing, if you're playing arcade, you will still have to account for distance in your shots. You will have to aim up. It will tell you how far to aim up, but your shots will still drop over a distance. And there's also the fact that as the movement of the tank, the gun is incredibly wobbly during tank movement. And I apologize for the little skip there. But right now I'm engaging, switching gears from what I probably was in the middle of saying. Right now I'm engaging a Soviet tank destroyer across the fields of Kursk. I'm trying to play games here using maybe a little bit of that tree and the crest of this hill to make it very difficult for him to see me, because in simulator battles you do not have any reticle. There is no, the replay is actually pretty accurate here. You don't get to actually see a red name above them. As you see there, I take them out, but you don't get the advantage of having a nice big fat red name over their head. So you have to calculate the shot yourself in terms of distance and range finding, but in addition to that, you must also spot the target and keep seeing it with your own eye. So it's a very interesting challenge in terms of simulator battles. But looping back into what if I can remember what I was saying, I was talking about tank movement and the aiming of the gun. So basically, in a World War II tank, the design was just not very ergonomic. Firing on the move was just not viable on a lot of tanks. The Russians did it at very close ranges with the T-34s, and the Shermans could do it to an extent because they were one of the first tanks to install a vertical stabilizer. But a tank moves around in a very jolted fashion, so you get very interesting effects. If you slow down to brake and come to a halt to fire at something, your gun is going to lurch forward towards the ground with the momentum of the tank. And then naturally, because you have a nice springy elastic suspension, when you finally do come to a halt, your gun's going to spring up from the pressure of the spring. So when you stop, you can't just stop and shoot. You must stop, wait for your tank to settle, and then shoot again. So it is a very interesting aspect in terms of actually managing to get the gun aiming where you want, because it is constantly moving around with the leveling of the ground and the speed at which you're moving. Those are all factors, as you see there. And SU-122 just taught me how much a 122mm high explosive shell can hurt a light tank, or a medium tank for that matter. Anything in this era gets just obliterated by SU-122s, as they very well should be. Which brings me to my next topic of discussion: gun caliber and shell dynamics. It's great if you have. You might think, okay, I've got this little long 5cm gun. I might be able to fire armor-piercing composite rigid out of it. and that would be fantastic. I could get, well, I don't know, 120 millimeters of penetration. That would be so good for an Era 2 vehicle. Why wouldn't you just use armor piercing and use the vehicle with the 50 millimeter, which gets this amazing shell? Well, it isn't that simple, because the weight of the shell will determine how much destruction it's going to cause on its path. So if you have a really large but not very penetrating shell, like say a short 75 millimeter shell. Hold on a second. I need to open up the second video. I'm recording this in a weird fashion. Start. And so because even though it's a very low penetration, low velocity shell that might be fired out of the one little stubby short German 75s, it's a 75 millimeter shell. It probably weighs 6 kilograms, and that 6 kilograms is going to do a heck of a lot more than a lightweight 1 kilogram armor-piercing composite rigid shell from a 5 centimeter gun. So just firing what you would call gold ammo in World of Tanks isn't the solution, because many times it drastically reduces the weight of your shell, and while it might guarantee that you go through, it doesn't guarantee that you're going to do a lot of damage. You just won't get as much punch with a armor-piercing composite rigid shell or highly explosive anti-tank shell. So it's a very interesting situation in terms of that, and that very much balances the fact that I was afraid that the direction that I saw this game had, where you could just have as much ammunition of any ammunition as you want, and it wasn't really all that expensive to run higher grade ammunition, but they have their disadvantages. In a more gameplay directly related sense, the combat, which I've been limited to for the most part at rank 1 and rank 2. I have only gotten into rank 2. This is the Panzer IV F1 and the Stug Aufs F are the only Era 2 tanks I have. And so, oh, excuse me. Hold on a second. I'm going to have to, I edited this in a weird way because I accidentally screwed up in recording. So I'm only going to be roughly on in terms of audio sync. Start. So, what was I talking about? I can't remember. I was talking about, yes, early era combat. Right now it's only the Russians and Germans. So that will change, obviously, as things progress. But it's a very interesting dynamic, especially in realistic simulator, where you are Russians versus Germans. It's not just a free-for-all of nations. The Germans actually don't have great guns. Historically, early World War II German guns were stubby little guns that just couldn't penetrate much. And in the case of even the Panzer II, it was a 2 centimeter flak gun. It could hardly knock out a tank. So it's very much a case of the Germans are just overpowered in terms of guns by the Russians. The Russians, even the reserve T-26, gets a punchy 45, which will do a fair margin of damage to you if it penetrates. And that has almost 50 millimeters penetration. The Panzer II, it sits there with its little 2 centimeter, which has 20-something millimeters of penetration. As you see, AI Katyusha rocket launchers. Looks like lunch. Yeah. We'll just sit here and indulge in these nice Katyusha dinners. But regarding that, the Russians, well, their early war tank designs just didn't have a lot of armor. The T-26, hardly anything. The T-28, 30 at max. And so it just creates a very interesting gameplay dynamic. So that is very interesting. Hopefully things will change and reverse and switch as you go up through the eras, I'd imagine. and I am very much looking forward to the combat in the later eras. But for right now, I am very much satisfied with the combat in Era 1 and Era 2. So we're sitting here with the Katyusha rocket launchers. I think we've taken out all of them at this point. That is if the video synced at all with the audio. So now we're just taking out these supply trucks. And we're basically, at this point I had realized, I had come over to this area because I realized I can't really participate in what's left without putting myself in a big risk. It would have required going into the open field and getting real close. So I just went back here and just take out all of these AI vehicles, which I think, I don't know if they are count right now, but in the future, I believe the Katyushas were considered artillery. Taking out artillery units, taking out all the artillery units on the other team, or maybe partially, will partially or completely eliminate the ability of the enemy to call in artillery artillery strikes on targets. Which is also a very interesting feature of this game. You can call, if you are a light or medium tank and you have the appropriate unlock, you can call in artillery strike. Sounds overpowered, doesn't it? Well, it's really not. You call it in, and guess what? It's exactly like real artillery. You give it a general area to fire in, and each one of the guns is going to fire is going to lob a shot in the area as a test shot. So you're sitting there, and someone calls an artillery on you. There's going to be 3 wildly inaccurate shots that just come in and land randomly. So that's going to tell you, okay, artillery is going to come down in this zone pretty soon. And then it takes time for the off-map artillery to get its shell to the target. So sure, when it does actually get there, it's going to obliterate the area you designated, but you have a fair warning, and it's just not a very fast, efficient process. It's really only useful taking out targets which are in a very heavy defensive position, or targets in the capture areas. So I think that's handled incredibly well. So in general, I'm just very impressed with this game. I don't see why it's not open beta right now, because honestly this game is very, very polished, and I've seen very, very, very few bugs. So I am very excited about this game, and I'll hopefully be showing you gameplay soon. Actually, I know I will, because I do have some footage of an arcade battle, which I actually recorded live, so that doesn't have all the weird, incomplete replay issues. So I will be showing that to you guys soon enough. And for right now, that is it for War Thunder Ground Forces, after I've murdered the thousands of Katyushas. And I will see you guys, hopefully, in a future episode. Goodbye.